Well, hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Dan Levin, and this is Essential Questions. In 1969, William Phillips wrote in the pages of Commentary magazine, "Football is not only the most popular sport, it is the most intellectual one. It is, in fact, the intellectual's secret vice. Pro ball is the opium of the intellectuals. Much of its popularity is due to the fact that it makes respectable the most primitive feelings about violence, patriotism, and manhood. The similarity to war is unmistakable. Each game is a battle with its own game plan, each season a campaign. And I have to admit, I love football. When I was a kid, my friends and I would spend countless days designing plays, running routes, and throwing passes until the sun set. There were various versions: one-hand touch, two-hand touch, and of course, we came home battered and bruised from hours of tackle football. But when I asked my parents if I could play in the local Pop Warner Tackle Football League, they looked at me like I had lost my mind. "You? Tackle football? Are you crazy? You're too small. You'll get killed. You're Jewish. Stick with soccer." Last September, it was estimated that the NFL was worth $230 billion, with each team valued on average at nearly $6.5 billion. The median salary for an NFL player is around $860,000 per season, but NFL stars get paid tens of millions of dollars a year. During the 2024 season, the average NFL game was watched by 17.5 million people. The Super Bowl is watched by more than 62 million people worldwide. A football game is filled with pure, visceral drama and excitement. The raw athleticism on display in every NFL game can be astounding. The players' strength, speed, dexterity, and agility create literally jaw-dropping moments of athletic beauty and genius. And at the same time, tackle football can be a life-threatening endeavor. We all watched with horror when Buffalo Bills defender Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field in cardiac arrest after a hit to his chest. And we all sighed with relief when he was resuscitated and recovered. But research into chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, shows that too many NFL veterans suffer brain damage, leading to premature dementia and early death, including many suicides. An Orthodox scholar wrote an article wondering if it was permitted under Jewish law to watch the NFL, given how dangerous it is to life and limb. And yet the allure of football is much more sublime. It's about some of the greatest of human virtues and values. It's about grit and determination, the willingness to work together as a team, to sacrifice. It's about the pursuit of excellence and greatness, a willingness to fight no matter how hard or difficult the challenge, never to give up, and to believe in yourself and your teammates. Vince Lombardi once said, "Football is like life. It requires perseverance, self-denial, hard work, sacrifice, dedication, and respect for authority." Today, I am so happy to welcome two Jews who have spent their lives in football and the NFL. Greg Joseph is a veteran NFL place kicker. Born in Johannesburg, South Africa, Greg played college football at Florida Atlantic University, and he has played for a variety of NFL teams, including the Miami Dolphins, the Cleveland Browns, Tennessee Titans, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Minnesota Vikings, Green Bay Packers, Detroit Lions, New York Giants, Washington Commanders, New York Jets, and was recently signed with the San Francisco 49ers. Greg is a graduate of the Donna Klein Jewish Academy in Boca Raton, where his mother, Ilana, is the head of the high school. Mike Tannenbaum is a veteran NFL analyst for ESPN. He served as the executive vice president of football operations for the Miami Dolphins from 2015 to 2018. And prior to that, he rose through several positions with the New York Jets, ultimately serving as the Jets general manager from 2006 to 2012. Mike is involved with several entrepreneurial endeavors and is the founder of the 33rd Team, a website he calls a football think tank. Guys, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, Mike, tell us a little bit, and Greg also, How did you guys fall in love with football?
For me, football is a game of chess played on grass. And it's, I think, by far the best sport in the world because it involves strategy, preparation, selflessness, teamwork, and physicality. And you don't know which play is going to make the difference in the game. So, really, going back to my childhood, it was a sport that always resonated the most with me.
Greg, what is it about football that you find so alluring? Having started your life in South Africa where they don't play American style football.
Yeah, good question. For me, it was soccer through and through, my whole childhood and, then moving to this country and going through high school and, um, seeing that my soccer days were probably numbered, and looking for a way to take the financial burden of college off my parents. Got asked if I wanted to join the football team in high school and kind of ran with it from there. But what became special to me was that, in a family of South Africans that didn't necessarily understand football, it was mine, and it was what I was able to, devote my time to and just learn so much about myself, and the journey that I've started on and obviously is still embarking on. So I think it hits on the competitive nature of who I am and the the platform. Bottom line now, the platform it gives me to be able to help, hopefully promote positive change and positivity in the world is second to none. And that's part of the reason I love it.
So tell me a little bit about that. What do you love about playing the game and talk a little bit about some of the stuff you do off the field that gives you such fulfillment?
Yeah, first off, I love the camaraderie. I think if you ask any of the guys what they're going to miss when they hang it up is it's not necessarily the times on the field, but it's the preparation and the times that come with that. It's the laughs and jokes in the locker room. It's the long days of training camp. It's the times, the travel and the time spent together on team planes and team hotels. So that's definitely the first off answer. I can't imagine taking part in a life where there's not some sort of sport and something with a competitive nature in it. So that's what draws me to it. That's what I love. And the relationships I get to build along the way. But more so importantly than that, in my opinion, is like I just alluded to, is the platform it gives you is second to none. I was raised by two amazing parents that instilled in me at a young age, the value of giving back and the value of community service. And, we had to do community service at Donna Klein. We had to do a certain number of hours each year, in order to, I guess, finish the year or graduate or whatever it may have been. So it's always been an important part of my life. I've always enjoyed it. And I think the most selfish thing you can do is be selfless because hopefully I'm helping others and creating more positivity in this world and making someone else's day just a bit better. But if you turn that, perspective 180, it does more for me than I can imagine, so that's why I try to give back. And then, my kind of what I try to live by is if I can make one person's day just a little bit better each day, that reach will just grow exponentially. And, I'll be very, very grateful if I have the opportunity to do that.
What are some of the things, Greg, that you've done where you get to give back, where football's been a platform?
Yeah, some of the things that come to mind is back when I was with the Browns, 2018, 2019. That was when Flint was going through the water crisis in Michigan. So it's not too far of a drive from Cleveland, Ohio. So did a little fundraiser and then was able to get a van. And I didn't personally do it, but then we had water, however many water cases and supplies delivered to the people of Flint. Just a bit more recently, I was able to do a kind of Kicks for Israel campaign when I was with the Minnesota Vikings, where we were able to raise 69,000, I believe it was, and send it over to Lekit Israel, which is a national food bank over there in Israel, which is, supplying basic necessities to families in need that were affected by the ongoing atrocities that go on there. And what I liked about it is obviously being Jewish, I'm glad it was helping Jews in Israel, but it's just helping people in general. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter your religion. It's there as a necessary aid to people that were affected by the tragedies, period. So, these are things, just a couple of the things that I was able to do, as well as more local things. Like I've worked with Paint Your Heart Out to paint houses in the local area for people that can't afford it or various community service events that were run by each team that it's just whatever. And I always try to tell the community service, managers or whoever's heading up that department at each team, hey, whatever you need, whatever you need from me on the off day on Tuesdays, I'm in, whether it's building houses, visiting schools, visiting hospitals, visiting, veterans. I'm in. I love it. I just want to give back and help in any which way I can.
I love that. I love that. Mike, you've been in football for many, many years in so many different capacities. What are some of the most important values and life lessons that you've learned in football?
Be a great listener, serve others, and there's no feeling like being in a winning locker room when you accomplish something collectively for the greater good, much more than for yourself, and to play for the name on the front of the jersey and not the back of the jersey.
And so, Mike, in the ways that you've sort of been able to experience those things in your different roles, what have you gotten from football? What is it that, as Greg talked about, the satisfaction of being able to give back to communities, what are the things that football has done for you?
It's provided an incredible lifestyle for my family and I to educate our kids. And just to be candid, Rabbi, I really think I'm the luckiest person there is. I got to run two NFL teams. I got to achieve my dreams. So it's really given me everything. I've poured everything into it, my heart and soul, and then some, it feels like on some days. But just to be candid, there's 32 NFL teams on this planet. And, I just had the great fortune to be able to be part of it for a long time.
Yeah, and you continue to be part of it through your work with ESPN, and I always look forward to your analysis there. I think when you describe football as like chess on grass, I think that's such a great image because on the one hand, there's so much strategy, and I love all that elements of the game, and at the same time, there's all of the individual remarkable performances by these incredible elite athletes and what they're able to do. Greg, I played soccer for a lot of years too. And, all soccer players always sort of imagine what it's like to try to kick field goals. And I went out on the field one time from 45 yards trying to see what it was to kick a field goal. And it's like threading a needle. It seems so far away. What's it like for you, Greg, when you go out there and either the game's on the line or your team is counting on those 3 points and you're lining up for field. What does that feel like to you?
Yeah, good question. I'd say it was a lot more emotional in the earlier, younger years of my career, but now, so I've always been a pretty process and, routine oriented guy. Now, being able to have some experience under my belt, I just go into my zone. I have the same process every single time, give myself the same cues and lock in on what I need to lock in so that there's minimal distractions and minimal variance. Because, like you're saying, like when you're back there, the upright's so big but so small at the same time. And I believe the math is when you're back at a 50-yard field goal, you only have like a three, like if you picture like a cone of where you need to start it, you only have a 3-degree vector where you need to technically start the ball to give yourself, a chance to make it. So you're working with really fine margins and really fine repeatability of motor skills. So that's where I just go into my zone and lock in because anything that gets into your head can distract you and turn a favorable outcome to an unfavorable outcome.
So, football and faith seem constantly to be drawn together. It's not uncommon after a game or even before a game sometimes to see players gather together in the middle of the field, take a knee, offer a prayer together. There's lots of evangelical Christianity that you see in and around football. And I'm curious to know for you guys, what's it like being Jewish in and around the NFL? What's it like being Jewish in the locker room? Mike, maybe you can tell us a little bit from your experience, and Greg also, what's it like being Jewish and part of the NFL?
Yeah, I've told very few people this story. The big breakthrough in my career was in 1997. I was 27 years old. I got hired by Coach Parcells at the Jets, who was the head coach and GM. And it was without question an opportunity of a lifetime to work for what I knew was a Hall of Fame coach, to be his right hand man, execute everything from an administrative salary cap standpoint, and really give myself a meaningful chance to be a GM. I was single, and I also knew I was, ironically, the only other Jewish person was the president, who was really on charge of the business side, but the only other Jewish person of note was the owner, Mr. Hess. And I grew up in a very traditional conservative home. We kept kosher, never missed a high holiday. And I was very conflicted on how I was going to handle the high holidays, which were really right at the beginning of the season, a very important time from, well, every day is important in pro football, but like administratively, there's always things going on. And I was very conflicted on how to handle things because it would have been non-negotiable in Maryland Richie Tannenbaum's house, to even think about not going to temple. And on the other hand, like I had pledged that and I would not recommend this to others, but I had pledged to myself once I got this opportunity, and I don't mean this figuratively, I mean this literally, that I was never not going to be in the building when Parcells was there, which meant like I basically went 4 years without a day off. And again, I wouldn't recommend that to people because back then there was no such thing as mental health. So one of the things that I'll never forget was about 2 to 3 days before Rosh Hashanah, Coach Parcells came to me and said, "Hey, I know you have a really important holiday coming up, and my expectations are like you won't be here." And I'll like never forget that moment. Like it just said so much of him as like a statesman, as a person, as a leader, as somebody that had a lot of empathy around faith. And it really like took what I thought was gonna be a really difficult moment for me and turned it into one of like, my gosh, like I'm working for the greatest person ever.
That's an amazing story. Really an amazing story. Greg, for you, having been in a bunch of different locker rooms and as someone who literally wears his Judaism on his cleats, I remember, right after October 7th, you were wearing Israeli painted cleats, I think, if I remember correctly. What's been your experience being Jewish in the locker room?
It's been a blessing to say the least. I've come across only a few Jews, throughout my playing career. And so, you connect with them instantaneously. But the reason I say it's a blessing is because it's led to a lot of positive and a lot of thought-provoking conversation with no negativity. It's always a learning conversation, where I learn something about, the other guy I'm talking to and their religion and vice versa, So there's a lot of positivity with that. Like Kirk Cousins and I used to talk about it ad nauseum. Every trip, not every day, but every couple weeks, we would have something, and just he would like to call them deep dives. And he's a devout Christian and one of the best guys you'll meet. So it's fun to learn different perspectives, different angles, and kind of helps formulate how you want to view things. Not that it's ever going to change my religion because it's always going to be very, very important to me. But so I've come across obviously a lot of Christians. One of my best friends from college, who's in the NFL, is Muslim. So we talked about that, and obviously things got really interesting, after October 7th. So I've never viewed it as a crutch. I've only viewed it as another platform within a platform, to step up, and it gives me opportunities like this. It helps me connect with other Jewish people in the building that I think we all know on here how somehow just being Jewish makes you feel that connection to someone else, even if you don't know them from any of the people next to them. So it's helped me forge relationships that will last a lifetime. It's also helped me possibly stay away from relationships that might not have been healthy for me. But I'm proud to say that, I appreciate you saying that, and I wear it on my feet, I wear it on my chest. I, still wear my Magen David. It goes with me to every game, to every away trip, etc. And I've not faced anything negative with it, which I'm very proud and happy to and blessed to say.
So I remember a number of years ago reading Tony Dungy's autobiography, and he tells this amazing story of when he was in college. He was quarterback, and when he came out of college, the NFL, it's hard to say, wasn't ready for a black quarterback. So his choice was to go play quarterback in Canada or to play a different position in the NFL. And so he decided the NFL was the best league in the world, and that's where he wanted to play, even if it meant changing his position. So he went to Pittsburgh as a defensive back, and he played a season. And then the next season, he ended up getting mono, and it was during training camp, and he was sick, and he couldn't really work out, and he was feeling very dejected. And he was, as I think everybody knows, a really serious Christian. And he was talking to Donnie Shell, who was also a very serious Christian. And he says, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm feeling terrible. I can't work out. I can't practice. Somebody's going to come up who wants the position as much as I do, and they're going to take the position from me. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And Donnie Shell looked at him and said, well, I guess we now know what's number one in your life, don't we? And he says, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, you always said that God was number one in your life, and now it appears that it's football. And he said in his book, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the book in front of me, but something to the effect where he said, up till then, he always thought of himself as a football player. And after that encounter, he realized, I'm a servant of God who happens to be playing football. And if the way that I need to serve God is playing football, then I'm going to do that with all of my heart. But if I'm going to serve God not playing football and doing something else, then I'm going to do that because it's serving God that matters most to me. I remember being incredibly moved by that story because he only played a few more seasons, as we know, and then became one of the youngest coaches in the NFL, and then ultimately, with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and in the Indianapolis Colts. And so I wonder a little bit about, how has your Jewish identity and your faith been a part of your football journey? Because both of you have had unbelievable successes, and both of you have had, I'm sure, moments where you really had to dig deep. And I'm curious to know sort of how your own belief, your own faith, your spirituality has been part of your football journey.
I thought it was really important, sort of as I worked my way up the ranks. First of all, I would say one of the cool things about football is there's a book about, the 10 men you meet in the huddle and the disparate background of others. And in Coach Parcells's induction speech into Kent, which is like 6 minutes long, and I strongly urge the audience to listen to it on YouTube. But basically, he talks about how the doors of an NFL locker room are wide open. We want everyone to come in. We don't care if you're gay, straight, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, Republican, Democrat, but we're the ultimate meritocracy. And if you help us win, you're going to stick around. If not, we're going to kick your ass out. And that's the part about the NFL I love. I felt like as I sort of like ascended in the ranks, I always had embraced my Judaism, but I felt like I had more and more of a responsibility to show that I could take days off for the high holidays. I could eat matzah in the facilities, ways that just things that were important to me as a way to demonstrate how important like my heritage, my faith, the culture, the religion was to me. And that wasn't sort of like a binary, like I think 20 years ago, I probably would have answered that question differently, where I probably would have felt like, well, it was a binary choice. Like I couldn't practice any of those things and get to where I wanted to go, which was to run a team. I think as I gain more credibility and stature and security, I realized I could do both those things. And I just want to make sure that whatever paths others choose, be it Jewish or otherwise, that there's plenty of room in the NFL for people with disparate backgrounds. And as Greg alluded to, Rabbi, like I think there's a level of tolerance and acceptance within the ecosystem, and that's something that starts really at the top with Commissioner Goodell, and it's the way it should be, and I certainly felt comfortable.
How about you, Greg?
Agreed and well said, Mike. And what I think for me is what I've realized too as I've gone through my career, and even, I walked on in college and then the goal was to earn a scholarship, etc. And what I've realized along the way is I'd be silly to think I did this on my own, because I know I didn't. I wouldn't have been able to do it with the amazing support system I have, in my family and friends and, those around me, but more so, with my relationship with God and my spirituality. There's no chance that I would have been able to do that without him and without everything that he's, blessed me and my family with. So that's kind of where that perspective started to set in. And then furthermore, I'm religious in my own way. I love going to Chabad and having my moment of peace and praying, to a Chabad where I used to go with my grandpa and I still go with my family. And now I'm able to bring my son there. It's an amazing full circle moment on a weekly cycle down here in the off season. But I think it takes a village, and being able to have so many people from all around the world that you don't even know just shower you with support and positivity, because of my religion. I think that definitely helps play a role in continuously moving forward, getting you through the tough times. Because if you haven't had tough moments in this league, you haven't been playing long enough, because it comes for everyone. So I think that's where it lies with me is I'd be remiss to say I did it on my own, because there's no way that I would ever got here on my own, without, like I said, the support I have, the relationship with God I have, and the perspective it's given me to know that I can put in the work and put in the time, but there's certain things that have to fall correctly into place for it to happen. And we're blessed to, have that happen and continuously have it happen. And if you look at my career, you said all the teams earlier, right? Have I had the cleanest, straight shot career? Absolutely not. But would I change it for the world? No way. Of course not. Because I've learned so much. I've met so many great people, and it's put me in rooms that I was meant to be in. And I'll be forever grateful for that.
I think about just how competitive it is to be a part of an NFL team. Mike, you talked about how there's 32 teams and they each have a very limited roster. The number of people who get to play professional football is so small compared to, however many kids out there who dream one day of playing in the highest levels. And then you think, Greg, in your position, there's only one place kicker, right, on a roster on almost every team. And, as someone who's been a fan of yours, Greg, for so long, I was watching last year as you were going through training camp with the Green Bay Packers. And I'm watching. All right, they cut this part of the roster. They cut this part of the roster. And then it's the final roster. I'm like, all right, Greg's going to be a Packer. And then I think it was like the next day they said,
Yeah,
sorry. How does your Judaism or your own spirituality help you manage those kinds of disappointments? I mean, I was in tears and you and I don't know each other, so I can only imagine what that must have been like for you. Is there something in your Judaism or your spirituality that has helped you cultivate the resilience necessary to move forward from things like that?
absolutely. And I think where it starts for me is knowing that it comes with the territory. We're in a cutthroat league and a cutthroat business, and teams are going to do what they feel is best for their team. But where that really hits home for me is football is what I do. It's not who I am. There's always going to be things way bigger than football in my life, and guys across the league's lives. And that's, religion, family are two of the, most common topics, I'm guessing. So I do my best not to let my identity get intertwined with my job, because then stuff like that can really, really affect you and really affect your psyche, like it does, unfortunately, for guys across the league, which I get. Football's our whole life and it's our livelihood. It's how we support our families and it's everything we do. But I'm blessed to have the perspective that, like I said, football is what I do. It's not who I am. So that knowing that if I get cut, I've prepared for that moment, to just refine my process that little bit more to get in another team and I'll be better for it. So there's always that positive outlook. And then also knowing that there's no better job in this world. But when my football days are done, I'm doing the work and, sharpening the knife so that I could seamlessly transition into another, because everyone in the league, it doesn't matter if you're Patrick Mahomes or Greg Joseph or, a rookie starting out or, one of the greatest tight ends ever in Gronk or Kelsey or et cetera. You're going to need a career change because of how young we are and because of how short-lived even the longest of careers are. Um, so I've always tried to prepare myself with begin with the end in mind type mindset. Um, and so it's also that positivity and filled with excitement of, okay, if these days are done for me, or when they're done for me, it's not a, oh no, and go into a deep hole. It's what's next, because that's just the way I have to live, for to be positive, to be able to take care of my family and to give them the life that I want them to have and that I think they deserve.
I hear that and I'm so inspired by that. I think about, Greg, part of the reason I became a rabbi is because I would have been a lousy business person, because letting somebody go to me is like the most agonizing thing in the universe. Thankfully, only in very rare occasions in my career have I ever had to tell somebody that we were parting ways. But Mike, when you're a GM, you're doing that constantly. And I know how much you build loving relationships and caring relationships where you invest so much of yourself in the people on your team. And then there are times where you have to sit across from them and say, sorry, this is your last day. What does that do for you? How does your own spirituality impacted by being sometimes the guy that grants the greatest wish ever? Congratulations, you're going to be a member of this team. We're going to make your dream come true. You get to play in the NFL. Or on the opposite side, where you have to say to somebody, sorry, this is your last day, not knowing if they'll ever get to suit up again. How did you wear that all those years when you were in those GM positions?
So I don't know if you know who Peter Gammons is, but Peter Gammons is a Hall of Fame baseball writer. He covered baseball for the Boston Globe for 35, 40 years and was inducted into Cooperstown. And when he was inducted, he said, as a writer, I had the professional responsibility to treat everybody with respect that I came across with. However, as a human being, I also had the right to like some people better than others. And I always thought about that on cutdown day. And unfortunately, it's part of what you sign up for. So math is roughly you cut 90 down to 53. Now, a whole bunch come back on practice squad, guys get hurt. But essentially, you're cutting 37 people. And I always say to the staff when that happens that morning, one, we have a job to do. Like we're getting paid to make these decisions. But as a human being, if somewhere in your soul it doesn't bother you, there's something really wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with having mixed emotions today. And look, most of my career has been in the public eye, so obviously I've been on both ends of those conversations. Neither side of it is easy or fun, but I think Greg gave great perspective, which is like we all know that day's coming. Hopefully players are as prepared as possible. And I always basically said the same thing, which was like, look, we may not be right. We may not be right. If you want to keep on playing, there's 31 other teams that certainly could employ or, be your next stop, could be within the next 24 hours. You could be back here. You just never know. But it was sort of like this juxtaposition of like, we're getting paid to do a job and we have to go do it. But on the other hand, like we are human beings, like Peter Gammon said. And if we're not empathetic, if we're not sympathetic, then there's something really fundamentally wrong with us because you're impacting 37 people.
So, football is a uniquely dangerous undertaking at almost every level. People talk about American football as akin to modern day gladiators. And of course, in the gladiator games, they were playing to the death. Hopefully, no one has nearly that kind of risk or injury in their performance of their role in a football team. But in the Talmud, the rabbis suggest that anyone who attended a gladiator game sort of shared in the blood guilt for someone who was killed. And obviously, that's not where football is. But at the same time, football is a violent game. And we know that many people suffer injuries that last them their entire lifetimes or sometimes only come to roost later by injuries like CTE and other kinds of things. And I'm curious to know a little bit about how you sort of hold those two elements of the game. It is an incredibly beautiful game. And at the same time, it's also violent. And Ray Lewis said, the long runs, the touchdowns, and all that, that's the glamour. But the game is about taking a man down physically and mentally. And Mike Strahan even was more candid. He said, it's the most perfect feeling in the world to know you've hit a guy just right, that you've maximized the physical pain he can feel. You feel the life just go out of him. And so I'm curious to know, just for you guys, how do you balance the love of the game? And it's fun to make it so physical. At the same time, people have some very serious injuries. I remember as a kid, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I remember watching Joe Theismann's leg break with Lawrence Taylor. You could hear it in the stadium. You could hear it on television. It was an excruciating injury to watch. I'm just curious to know sort of like, how do you guys sort of balance your own humanity and the fact that this is a pretty violent game?
Yeah. The reason I chuckled, Rabbi, was there's a great expression that football is not for the well-adjusted. When you hear the stray hands and the Ray Lewis's, that's sort of like exhibit A and B of like very not well-adjusted people, myself included, of course. Look, I would say a couple things. I think the commissioner's been an incredible, incredible leader relative to let's make this sport as safe as possible, almost like a strike zone of where you could hit somebody. With that said, the physicality is undeniable. And I think teams, I could just speak firsthand, over the last several decades have gotten much better with protection, equipment, sensible rules. With that said, it's still an incredibly physical sport. And I think people have to understand the risk they're taking. I'm happy that Greg's a kicker and my son's a long snapper.
So, Greg, how do you balance the joy of the game with the risks that come with hopping onto the field?
Being a specialist, keeping if I do my job, I get to keep my head and my brain out of it. And I think it's probably the only position, well, that and a punter that my Jewish mother would have let me play it at a high school or collegiate level or any level, period. So, um, no, it's tough because you see guys that you get close to, become good friends with a lot of guys in the locker room and they go through it, all types of injuries. But it's kind of going back to the last point, it's we know what we sign up for. You know that if you want to compete at this level and get the opportunities at this level and then, earn the income that comes to this level, your body's going to go through it, not necessarily at my position, but in the locker room in general. So it's everyone in there, it's an understanding. And Mike made a good point. No one in there in the locker room or on the opposing teams is looking to hurt other people. At the end of the day, they want everyone to go home safely to their families. But you do have to get into a certain type of mindset to win and dominate the person you cross the line of scrimmage from you in order to help your team win the game to a certain extent. So you have to get into that certain mindset that it's pretty hard to wrap your head around unless you've been around it, and to fully understand it. I'm not going to act and sit here like I know what it's like. But because for me, it's me versus me. But for a lot of other guys, it's me versus you, and one of us is going to win and one of us is going to lose.
It's interesting when you take a look at the book of Exodus and sort of the core of Jewish spirituality, there is this idea that you feel a sense of God's presence in community, that it was only when the Jews gathered together, all together as one at the foot of Mount Sinai, that they were able to fully encounter the presence of God. It was when they fashioned that oneness from the many that they were able to be in tune with each other so that they could then be in tune with what it was that God was trying to tell them. And I think about that because, as Jews, we gather to almost everything we do is with community. We gather together to pray with community. We commemorate the birth of a child with community. We celebrate someone's coming of age with community. We celebrate together with community when someone weds. The community is supposed to come together when someone has an illness or, God forbid, a loss. There's every element of Jewish spirituality is really in many ways woven in this idea of community. And I think one of the reasons I've always loved team sports, and especially when I've played football, is that team element, when everybody is sort of one with each other and the team is operating as a unit, there is something really spiritual about how that feels, even if it's physically. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what it really feels like to be part of a locker room. What does it feel like to be part of a team where you have your individual role? And Greg, yours specifically, you're the only one on the team that does what you do. And in some ways, I can only imagine how lonely it is where, time has run down and Greg trots on onto the field and you either make it or you don't, and the team either wins or loses. That's a very lonely feeling, I can imagine. But at the same time, you're a part of this team. And Mike, you're cultivating teams, you're putting teams together, and that makes you a part of that team. What spiritually does it feel like to be part of a football team in the NFL? What does it feel like to be in the locker room?
Yeah, I think it's the sense of community is amazing, right? And what I'll say before going into the locker room is that's been one of the most amazing things is going, whether it was on the Dolphins or the Browns or in Tennessee, etc. Everywhere I've gone, there's been people that have either reached out to me or my mom said, "Hey, if you need somewhere to go for Shabbat, he's more than welcome here. If you need somewhere to go for, and I always find somewhere to whatever city I'm in, I always find a little Chabad to try to sneak into the back to for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because obviously that's important to me. And then the community that comes from it, is amazing because wherever I've gone, it's been met with nothing but support. And now to take that to a more micro level in the locker room, that's what we do it for, right? What I referenced to earlier is the number one reason I think what guys will miss is the camaraderie and that locker room type feeling. So wins and losses are important, right? People's jobs are made or people are promoted, people are fired based on wins and losses. But that camaraderie, that team feeling in the locker room is the most important thing, because that way I know I get to trot out there, like you said, for a last second field goal with full confidence. And I have every intention of making every kick, and some just don't go your way. But I know because the team has my back and they see my work ethic and they respect me and I respect them, and we're all on the same page of winning, that if things don't go my way, they still have your back. And there's still that team aspect in it. They don't just turn their back on you, because that's not what a team does. And then to further look at that at a micro level, special teams is a team within a team, because the long snapper, the holder, who's also the punter, and myself are a team within a team. And if the long snapper doesn't do his job or the punter doesn't do his job, that gives me a very low success rate. So we're a team within a team, and I have to trust those guys with everything. And, whether I do my job to the best of my ability or not, they got my back and I got theirs.
Yeah, I would say something similar. Like, I love the words that Greg used there, community. And I think the best teams that I've been around, Rabbi, were ones that, like, sometimes, like, especially in the off season, I wouldn't say like you force things, but you have team building events, going bowling or going away for training camp. And I think the best teams are the ones that hang out in the cafeteria longer, who you get a real sense of like selflessness and buy-in for one another. And I always felt like that was an indice of, hey, did we do a good job putting this together? Likewise for the staff and the coaching staff. Are they together in the parking lot after games? Like, is it real or is it forced? And I got to tell you, like, one of the greatest joys I've gotten is decades since I've been with certain people, still be in touch with them and have meaningful relationships with them. That's what it's all about. It's the ultimate people business, and you kind of, it's an intangible, much what Greg say, like you sort of know it and feel it and realize you're part of something very special.
So Tony Dungy said what he learned from football was be a pro, act like a champion, respond to adversity, don't react, be on time. Being late means either it's not important to you or you can't be relied on. Execute. Do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. Not almost, all the way, not most of the time, all of the time. Take ownership, whatever it takes, no excuses, no explanations. And I remember reading those words saying, those are pretty good values for a rabbi to hold on to, or anyone to hold on to. And as we conclude, I'm just curious, what are the most important lessons that football has taught you about who you want to be?
I would say, what you just talked about with resilience and responding to adversity, not reacting. I try to, I get up every day now and say, hey, the best is yet to come. And I have a lot more that I want to accomplish in my career. And I need to work harder and be better tomorrow than I was today. And I want to take the foundation and the lessons that I learned and sort of like validate the trust that people gave me and try to do some special things in the next part of my career. And for me, part of that has been to help others get to where they want to go. And part of what we do at the 33rd team is help young men and women transition into football. And that's been fulfilling. But I think there is a sense, and I know Coach Dungy and what he stands for, that the game's bigger than all of us. And we do have, as Curtis Martin likes to say, like, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I think it's incumbent that we help others get to where they want to go as well.
Yeah, well said. And I think for me, I think it's very hard to be a good athlete, a good businessman, a good, you name it, without being a good person first. And the way I kind of boil down, religion at that point is, the end of the day, everyone has their own beliefs based on what religion you are, but a lot of it comes down to, are you being a good person and treating others with respect? And I think it's very hard to excel with what you're doing if your values are misaligned in that manner. So that's kind of where I start. I don't think I'd be where I'm at without trying to be a good person. And I'm not saying I'm definitely not the best guy out there. And I'm just all I'm saying is every day I'm just striving to get better and better and better, and help out more people that are in need, period. So I think without that, I wouldn't be where, where I'm at all. And I think it's just hard to, you know, necessarily put into words, and people try to put what they do over who they are, because it's never going to be as important. Like we referenced earlier, there's way more important things based on your perspective. And at the end of the day, if I can just help uplift, one person, like I said, and just make their life a little bit easier, a little bit better, that'll be more important than any of the field goals I've made, period.
Well, I want to thank you both. I wish you both a very successful upcoming season, and just so grateful for your perspective and for your time. Lots of good luck to both of you.
No, thank you. I
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The Essential Questions podcast has been made possible by the Temple Beth El Jewish Ideas Incubator, committed to creativity and innovation in modern Jewish life. Many thanks to our production team. You can find this podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, and the Podbean app, as well as on Temple Beth El's website, tveboca.org/essential questions. Share this podcast with your friends. Rate us on Apple Podcast or Spotify to spread the word. And we want to know, what are your essential questions? Let us know by emailing us at eq@tveboca.org. I'm Rabbi Dan Levin, and thanks for listening to the Essential Questions podcast.